On an average school day, Haruka is sitting alone in his desk because he is a total loner. He is well aware that he is a loner, and as a matter of fact, he enjoys being alone since his only other option would be to hang out with his classmates, and he freaking hates them. There are a bunch of groups in the class, including the delinquents, the popular girls, the gym bros, and then there's the other people no one cares about. Haruka doesn't belong in any of these groups, and he is fine with that since he has a lot more time to read his books with no friends, but his reading session is interrupted when bright light appears beneath him. It looks like a summoning circle is spawning beneath the students, and for a moment Haruka got excited because he knows this means he gets to go on an isekai adventure, but then he realizes that he's been getting too much screen time for a loner. And if he knows anything about isekai, that means he's going to get screwed over somehow. He's not about to let himself become a victim before GTA 6 drops. So while the portal is still loading, he walks up to the door and tries to leave. Unfortunately, the door seems to be bolted shut with magic, so no matter how much force he uses, he isn't able to get out of the room. The portal is almost done loading, so his classmates begin disappearing, fading away, and as a last-ditch effort to avoid his otherworldly fate, Haruka decides to crawl into the ceiling vents to wait out the summoning circle. He jumps up and manages to crawl his way into the roof of the class. But just when he thought he was safe, the summoning circle followed him through the roof and he ended up getting summoned anyway. It sucks that he couldn't stay on Earth, but since he already knows how this kind of thing goes, he expects some kind of fat king or pretty princess to show up soon and ask for his help or something. However, that's not what happens as Haruka sees a bald old man frantically waving his arms around and panicking at the sight of Haruka. Apparently, the old man is God, and he was the one in charge of the summoning and has already sent all of Haruka's classmates off to the other world. But because Haruka came up with the idea to hide in the ceiling, while he still ended up getting summoned, his summoning was delayed, so God needs to send him to the other world quickly before he gets in trouble for this mess. He tells Haruka that he will get abilities to help him in the other world, but since he's late, all the good abilities have already been chosen, so the only things remaining are all the leftover ones that no one wanted. To list a few, he has the option of picking skills that equate to Minecraft Villager, Gambling Dice, Contact Lenses, and a Stick. And to make it worse, he only has a limited number of skills he can choose, so Haruka begins taking out his anger on the god for summoning him here and only having trash skills left. The god knows he messed up, but he didn't graduate from God University just to get yelled at by a high schooler. So he tells Haruka that he will give him all the remaining trash skills as an apology, but he doesn't want to see his ugly face around here anymore, so he teleports Haruka to the other world immediately. It's cool that he gets to have more skills than normal, but that doesn't do him much good if he gets tossed out into the woods as soon as he arrives. He's never lived in the woods before and he has no supplies, but then he notices a pouch on the floor and it turns out that it's a part of the Minecraft Villager skill, and the pouch allows him to store an unlimited number of items in his inventory. There's also a bunch of starter gear in there, so at least Haruka isn't going to be doing this without equipment. After he's got his stuff on, he decides to check his stats, but thanks to the gambling dice, he needs to roll a number to get stat points. He just goes with it and throws the dice on the ground, so as a result he ends up with a score of M, and he has no idea what M means, so he just decides to put the M points all into his luck stat. To his surprise, when he opens his stat window, his luck stat is completely maxed out, making him wish he used it on something better. He continues looking through his stats, and to his surprise, aside from all the trash skills, he actually gained 2 unique skills as well. Because he was such a loner on Earth, he will be unable to form a party in this world even if he wants to. But in exchange, his second skill allows him to force monsters to serve him because he wouldn't be able to make any friends otherwise. Haruka is a bit disappointed that he won't get a chance to make a harem for himself, but it is what it is. Right now, he's more concerned with the fact that he doesn't see any of his classmates nearby, and he finds that strange since this is supposedly the starting location. But then again, he never cared about them before, so why would he care about them now? Right now, he needs to focus on getting supplies so he can live a good life out here in the woods, but that's a lot easier said than done when he can barely see anything with all the trees in the way. At this rate, it won't be long before he runs into a monster accidentally, and if that were to happen, he would be a dead man for sure. Just then, Haruka remembers that he has a contact lens skill, so he puts on the contact lenses and suddenly he can see all kinds of information about his surroundings. It turns out that the contact lenses come with an inbuilt appraisal skill, and with it, he is able to easily traverse the forest and find some mushrooms that he can eat without dying. He decides to pick some, and thanks to his villager bag, he can take as many as he wants. He then goes over to the river nearby and uses his bag to fetch a little water to drink. But once he's done with that, something else catches his eye, so he wanders back into the forest where he finds a little cave. It looks too interesting for him to ignore, so Haruka says a little prayer in case there's a monster here that will attack him. And after that, he begins exploring the cave. Luckily, it looks like there aren't any monsters here, and this place is quite spacious, so he decides to make this his base of operations. He pulls out a tent and a magic lantern from his bag to set up camp, after which he then proceeds to light a small fire with his temperature control magic so he can stay warm for the night. Coincidentally, using his temperature magic once allowed him to unlock a new fire, and being wary of monsters made him acquire several detection skills as well, but Haruka's only attack skill is a stick, so he still needs to figure out a way to defend himself. The next morning, Haruka wakes up with a jolt, so nervously leaves his tent, and to his relief, it looks like there weren't any monster attacks overnight. He is safe all thanks to the anti-monster properties of his useless skill items. But even if he is safe from harm, it doesn't mean he's safe from her hunger, so he busts out a frying pan and cooks up some of the mushrooms he gathered yesterday. And if you're wondering where he got the frying pan, it was just sitting there in his villager bag along with a full set of kitchen knives and some beef jerky. So far, that bag has been the most useful thing in Haruka's arsenal, so he wonders what kind of villager stocked it up before he got it. In any case, now that he has eaten, he needs to figure out what he's going to do from now on, so he heads outside and takes a little walk to think. For now, that cave will work well as a base of operations, but Haruka still needs to worry about finding a reliable source of food and creating safety measures against any monsters that may try to attack him in this world. Fortunately, with his contact lenses, it shouldn't be too hard for him to gather enough food to last for a while, as he finds some more mushrooms and some herbs almost immediately, but he still has to figure out a solution to his monster problem. Just then, Haruka's detection skill kicks in, and he notices something going on nearby, so he decides to go check it out and is horrified once he realizes that the noise was caused by goblins. It would be bad enough if it was one, but there's two of them, and they both have strength stats that are higher than his own. He wonders if he will be able to take them down with his current strength, and he contemplates running away, but the fact that he is living in this forest means he will eventually have to fight the goblin if he wants to survive, so he chooses to get it over with while he still has the element of surprise. With that said, he isn't sure his stick will be good enough for the job on its own, so he tries using one of his trash to wrap the stick in magic to see if that does anything. It works out better than he thought, so he lunges out of the bushes and strikes at one of the goblins. After smacking it on the head, the goblin is dazed and confused, but Haruka doesn't stop there and proceeds to beat the daylights out of it until it finally dies. That's one down, but Haruka still has to deal with the other one, so as it charges at him, he dodges out of the way of its attack. Now that he has gotten a feel for it, Haruka realizes that the goblin's attacks are actually really easy to predict, so he effortlessly evades it and then proceeds to smack it around before hitting it with a wave of magic. Having just won his first fight against goblins, Haruka thinks that's enough work for the day and decides to head back to the cave so he can rest a little, and once he's back, he roasts some mushrooms for dinner and takes a look at the club he looted off the goblin corpse. It may have high damage, but it's heavy and has a short range, so Haruka decides to continue using his stick for now. He then checks the rest of his stats, and to his surprise, he managed to level up from the fight he had today, and not only that, all his existing stats were doubled as a result. By the next morning, Haruka wakes up and has breakfast as usual, but he is starting to get sick of eating nothing but mushrooms all the time. He really wishes he could eat some meat out here, but he's going to have to learn how to hunt to do that, and before that, needs to learn how to enhance himself first. The first thing he wants to try is the magic fusion skill he acquired, and for a quick explanation, it basically covers his entire body with magic in order to boost his physical and magical defenses. It also greatly increases his strength, so he should be able to fight with much more efficiency. Additionally, his appraisal skill was upgraded to level 2, so he uses it to see if anything has changed, but the only difference is that there's a question mark next to all the descriptions. Haruka has clearly never played video games before because he spends a whole minute trying to figure out what a question mark icon could mean, and eventually he just gives up on it altogether. Instead, he heads outside to do some magic training, and as he is leaving, he notices something on the floor, so he picks it up thinking it might be some meat, but it turns out to be another mushroom. It may be delusional, but Haruka was really hoping meat would just grow on trees in this world, and he soon realizes that he's not going to be finding any meat on the forest floor, so he decides to just go ahead with his magic training. He activates his mana infusion and takes a step forward, But with the physical boost he gets, he ends up flying forward by several meters. His body feels much lighter than before, and with very little effort, he can easily dart around the forest almost like he's teleporting. On top of that, his dexterity is greatly enhanced as well, so he can move and strike at things with precision. The first thing he does with his enhanced strength is challenge 2 random goblins, and unlike yesterday, he is able to knock the goblin out in one hit. He is feeling really confident about his new strength, so he thinks he can handle even more goblins, but when he actually sees a group of 3 goblins, he starts having second thoughts and slowly backs away before he gets jumped. He decides that he has worked hard enough for today and heads back to his cave so he can practice his magic. He continues this routine and practices fighting during the day, and by night, he starts tinkering with his magic to see what he can do with it. And apparently, he can make coffee tables. By following this routine, Haruka is able to eventually to one-shot a goblin and create a proper table with his magic crafting. So he then uses it to create a gate for his cave so he can go out at night. And that means he can finally go hunting. He goes after a rabbit because he hasn't tasted meat in so long, and when he finally catches up to it and is about to start cooking, he notices something else nearby. At first he thinks it's a goblin, but upon further inspection, he finds out that it's something even worse. Those are the delinquents from his class, and he really doesn't want to have to deal with them, so he intends to sneak away in the other direction, but as he starts heading that way, he realizes the popular girls are here as well, along with the gym bros and the nerds. He doesn't think the nerds are that bad since he occasionally hung out with them back in school, but he still doesn't want to have to talk to them though. Finally, he notices the student council group which has the class rep in it. And while he may hate socializing with the people in his class, he has to admit that the class rep has always been really nice to him. So it would be the least he could do to return that kindness, even if it's just to say hello. He briefly considers revealing himself and talking to her, but then again, he doesn't want to ruin the solitary life he already has. Since no one knows that he is here, he has the chance to be truly alone like he has always wanted. There's no idle chatter, no taxes, and no one to annoy him. So he really doesn't want to mess that up by having contact with his classmates because they are already pretty annoying. That's why he officially decides that he will ignore his classmates and live by himself so he can conquer this world alone. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.